Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Acupuncture is My Life. Now, I'm happy to hear that you guys are really into this diet discussion relative to Eastern nutrition I've been going over on the past few days, okay? I've received tons of messages with certain questions regarding the taste of foods, the thermal nature, that being the temperature, whether, certain foods are cooling or cold or warm or hot. And some of you guys have even messaged me from other countries inquiring about genetically modified foods or processed foods. No. Whenever I'm discussing Eastern nutrition, those types of foods, and that I don't even consider it foods, but they're never included in an Eastern nutrition picture. Okay? So when I'm discussing salty foods, I'm not talking about salty Ritz crackers or salty Lay's potato chips. No. All right? Or sour foods. It doesn't include sour candy or sweet foods such as sugary drinks. No. Okay? Just organic vegetables, fruits, and meats. So always attempt to keep that in mind, okay? And remember, let's see if you do remember from the last episode, sweet foods pertain or have an affinity for the spleen and stomach. Sour foods have an affinity for the liver. Salty foods, the kidneys. Acrid foods, the lungs, but can assist the spleen with digestion. And bitter foods, the heart, and small amounts assist the spleen and encourages stomach chi to go downward, which is the proper direction of chi for the stomach. But now, in this episode, I want to jump into the way food should be consumed. Right? Because an acupuncturist understands that the way in which you consume food is just as important as the food itself in which you intend to consume. Because the key here is just because you're eating a well-balanced, nutritious diet, it doesn't guarantee healthy chi or the production of healthy chi if your spleen and stomach, which represent your middle jiao, is compromised by other factors that have affected its overall performance. Because if you listen to Acupuncture is My Life podcasts on a regular basis, I speak a lot about the importance of the spleen and stomach as your middle jiao being responsible for the production of all chi and blood created after birth. And it heavily relies on the food that you eat, the nutritional value of the food in which you eat. But if the spleen and stomach have been compromised by other factors that influences its efficiency, keep that in mind. Let's just take, for instance, the liver. Now, the liver can actually overact on the spleen. And this can happen when there's too much stress in your life. Stress, anger, and so forth negatively affects the liver. And as I've stated in the past, liver controls the direction of all chi within the body, the free flow of chi in the body. So now, if spleen chi is designed to go up to the lungs, and you're stressed, and the chi of the liver's negatively impacting the direction of the spleen chi, and it goes down, you'll start having bouts with diarrhea. The same way as I said in the past, if stomach chi is going in the wrong direction, there'll be vomiting, burping, and so forth and so on. So a stressful lifestyle, lots of stress, anger, and so forth can cause the liver to overact on the spleen and affect the direction in which the chi of the spleen flows. So the internal organs, just the same as in biomedicine, it's all interconnected and heavily dependent on each other. Okay? So if its functions have been compromised, then, and this is why I say, along with seeing a physician, seeing an acupuncturist on a regular basis, because we treat mental and emotional disorders. And you cannot understand why you can't lose weight, and why is your food stagnating in your stomach or middle jiao, the intestines, and you're looking as if you're like 12 months pregnant, and you don't understand that. Your liver could cause that. It can affect your overall digestion if you're stressed out and faced with certain mental and emotional disorders. So please keep that in mind. Now, as I started out by saying the way in which food is consumed, right? Time of eating is super, super important. And we see patients here at the Acupuncture My Life Clinic in New York City. And unfortunately, some may have evening jobs or overnight jobs. So their dinner can end up being around the time of your breakfast. And that's not good. But understand one thing, though. The spleen and stomach functions at its best with regard to a regular eating routine. Because the spleen and stomach has its own way of preparing itself, developing an internal cycle that aligns itself or works in association with the liver. And here we go, back to the liver again. To receive and process foods at a certain time. So let's say you miss a lot of meals, or the time in which you're able to eat. I won't say choose, but able to eat is at some off time. So it's real erratic. It's all over the place. The functions of the spleen and stomach will now become compromised. But understand this one thing, and this is what I say, when it comes to acupuncture, everyone is treated different. So you see, in some cases, the optimum times for eating tend to vary from person to person. But I'll say this. When you're eating large amounts of carbohydrate-rich meals, you want to eat those types of meals earlier in the day, because then it can provide like a regular or steady supply of yang qi for the fuel in which you need to carry out the day's activities. So that's important. So the best time, I would say, for, let's say, a large carbohydrate meal would be between 7 a.m. and 11 a.m. And that's the time of the spleen and stomach. Keep that in the back of your head. And smaller meals, they're usually, I recommend to a lot of my patients, both in clinic in New York City or virtual, eating smaller meals toward the end of the day. Because that's usually when your body is now beginning to transition from its yang active phase of the day to a yin quiet phase. Okay, and your body's preparing itself for rest. Now, I've seen patients with deficient qi that found that they needed to eat small amounts more frequently, like let's say every 2 to 3 hours. But understand this, eating large meals late at night will negatively impact and overtax a person's spleen and therefore disrupt their sleep. Think as to if you've ever experienced that before. Think about that. Now, something else about the way in which you're consuming your food is extremely important as well. And that is how relaxed are you when you eat? Are you just gobbling your food down because you have to rush to get to work, to get to school, to get to a meeting, or what have you? Are you whiffing your food down really quick and you're anxious because it's lunchtime, you snuck out of the conference room to grab a quick bite and then shot back? Understand something. The digestive process demands a lot of energy. A lot. So, guess what? And this digestive process happens in the middle jiao, which consists of the spleen and stomach, among other organs. But if your qi is diverted away from the spleen and stomach when you're eating and allocated to another activity when it should be concentrated in your middle jiao, then there becomes less qi available for that transformation of what you've eaten into qi and blood. Keep that in mind. That is like super important. And you could even let's take for example like watching television or reading a book while eating. That can also affect your digestive functions because qi is being diverted away from the spleen and stomach, and it's being utilized to focus on what you're watching on television, absorbing that information, or what you're reading in a book or on a laptop. And those are the individuals that work while they eat lunch, which is not good. Okay? Because when you're doing this, you're diverting qi from the spleen and stomach and sending it to the eyes. And the eyes, the liver plays a large part in a person's eyes. So keep that in the back of your head. You know, these energy intensive activities such as eating breakfast while working or eating lunch while working or eating while you're standing up or running for your transportation or whatever, or even driving, tends to negatively or can negatively impact your overall digestive process. Okay? So keep that in mind. Think of this, think of something else. Let me take a sip of tea. Got my tea here. Oh. Now, keep in mind, are you enjoying what you're eating? Are you enjoying your meal and the fact that you're sitting down and eating that meal? That's super important for good digestion, and many individuals do not realize that. Because the texture of your food, the flavor of your food should be pleasing to you. The colors of your food should be appealing to the eye. So even like the most nutritious diet, well-balanced diet, will not be good enough for you if you're looking at eating as a chore and you're just tolerating it. So be very careful, because eating should not be a chore. And you have individuals, let's say, that will have celery and lettuce or this or that, and it appears boring, but it is nutritious and healthy. And if you're looking at eating that meal as a chore, just to so-called stick with your diet plan, not good. You want to enjoy it because it's important. Because if you don't enjoy it, you can create a form of deficiency in the spleen. And you'll present with spleen deficiency patterns. And an acupuncturist will pick that up right away. And they'll ask you, are you enjoying the meals that you're eating? Yes, you're following a certain diet plan, but are you enjoying it? And more times than not, when we pick up spleen deficiency patterns, the patient will say, no, I'm not. Okay, and then when you're following these super rigid, these ultra restrictive diets, they play into an imbalance of the spleen and have a tendency to create a destructive cycle of food obsession and further weaken the spleen. So you want to enjoy eating. Okay? Because a healthy meal will settle in your liver and it'll ease the stomach and facilitate the entire digestive process. So keep that in the back of your head as well. It's important. Another is, are you overeating? Now, in the Western Hemisphere, most individuals are. And overeating is spreading across the globe at a rate that is alarming. You see, in more developed nations, individuals eat way too much than they should. And then they're sedentary, based on their jobs, education, and so forth. So they find themselves exceeding in excess of, let's say, around 40% of the calories in which they consume on a daily basis, just sitting in their guts. And this is becoming a pandemic in and of itself, and that's obesity. Okay? I'll tell you a little secret when it comes to eating. When you're done with your meal, you want to be able to walk away from your table feeling, yeah, I could eat a little more, but guess what? I'm not going to. You know, because the ones that cannot do that and they stuff themselves, you know, I see tons of patients with excess patterns, because when you overeat, you create excess patterns internally, and there'll be excess heat or damp heat or phlegm with chi stagnation or even food stagnation. So you want to decrease how much you eat. You know, you may enjoy it. It tastes good. But say to yourself, I want to walk away from this table feeling satisfied to the extent that, yes, I can eat more, but I'm good. But I'm good. You know, but I also see individuals who have some form of chi deficiency pattern. And I'll recommend that they eat smaller meals, but more frequent. So that's key. Then you have those that undereat. In a serious attempt to lose weight. But guess what? You can damage your spleen chi and your spleen yang doing that. So you want to be really careful. Because an acupuncturist has a tendency to advocate eating sufficient amounts of the right foods at the right time in combination with enough activity throughout the day. And this will help you maintain a good weight. Because when a person's spleen chi is strong, a nice healthy metabolism will help offset weight gain. So keep that in mind as well. And fasting, you want to be very careful with fasting. Acupuncturists don't, usually for the most part, don't recommend fasting. Have some that I know of, yes. In rare cases, it depends on what's going on with that patient. Because fasting does have a valuable therapeutic role in some situations, especially with patients who are suffering from excess conditions, somewhat of like what I've stated a few minutes ago. Internal damp heat, phlegm, food stagnation, and so forth. But fasting to an acupuncturist is a little different than what you may be thinking. Fasting to an acupuncturist is basically seen as not eating solid foods. But you can have, let's say, vegetable juices and even some light broths. And that's what we would consider fasting. And multiple days of fasting is not usually recommended by an acupuncturist. But if you fast every day, every now and then, for a day, where you're just having vegetable juice and a light broth, then that's excellent. But you'd have to sit with an acupuncturist to put together a plan. Because fasting every now and then can accelerate the body's elimination of certain pathogens. So an acupuncturist may sit and discuss with you doing it every 7 days or so, or doing it for 2 straight days, or over the weekend. It varies. But we usually don't recommend fasting for all of our patients with deficiency patterns. Key word here is deficiency. Because it can significantly aggravate the problem, and that being that deficient pattern. Okay? But you really want to sit with an acupuncturist to discuss fasting before actually doing it. Okay? Because you want to be careful with exacerbating deficiency patterns, creating an environment for fluid retention and even fatigue, as well as digestive weakness. So be careful. And also modifying your diet is important too. Because food tends to play, or can play, several social roles in addition to maintaining a nutritional purpose. And that's getting into ritual aspects, certain celebrations, but I'll leave that for both yourself and an acupuncturist to discuss, because the key here is totally understanding that health is wealth. The wealth, it's not in an app on your phone. Okay? It's not in an investment account. It's not in the bank. It's not in the safe. It's definitely not in your pocket or your purse. The wealth is not under your mattress or under the doghouse in the backyard, and it's not in the shoebox in the closet. The wealth is in you. And that's why you listen to these podcasts, which is a good thing. Okay? But keep that in mind and make acupuncture a part of your life, okay? Because acupuncture is my life. What's yours?